Welcome to the SIWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here again with our guest mentor, Ellie, and we thought we'd do something a little bit different where we wanted to combine a few topics together and chunk them up into little kind of minisodes is what we're calling them. So we wanted to be under the broader topic of kind of the Odyssey. So for the folks that are aware, they've started adding some new life stages after kind of childhood, teenage years, and before you get to the adult stage, they've added this Odyssey type time stage where a lot of people are figuring things out. And we thought we'd get into three major topics. We'd get into learning how to self-advocate. We were going to get into dealing with adversity. And the last one is just adulting, right, in general. So we thought we'd kind of break it down into those three topics. I wanted to move into the subject of dealing with adversity, right? So if you can tell us a little bit about your experience in dealing with adversity. I'm sure a lot of folks are doing that with COVID, but I'm sure throughout various stages of life, they'll also deal with adversity. So what are your thoughts and insights that you'd want to share with folks?
Great. Nice transition into Minisode episode number 2. Nice one on that. So I picked dealing with adversity as topic number 2 in our odyssey of minisodes because everybody's been dealing with some sort of adversity during the pandemic, whether it's your personal relationships with other people, could be within your family or your friends or your romantic life. Everybody's had COVID-19 related challenges, and a lot of the folks who are entering the workforce or new in the workforce are having professional challenges. For myself, I can definitely say I've solidly experienced all three. 2 weeks ago, I got rejected from a job that I was kind of hoping to get. The position went to a more qualified candidate, it's fine. I had some time to reflect on that. Before that, COVID-19, until I got my double dose of vaccination, was really challenging, not being able to see my friends and to speak to them face to face. And even before that, interpersonal relationships that had to deal with, like I had a breakup or a relationship that I had with people in my family, like being stuck in the same house with them all the time due to COVID. So all that is to say that adversity is definitely a part of going through this odyssey when you're in this stage of learning to adult.
Yeah, and I think part of it is previous to that, a lot of these adversities were probably shielded a little bit by mom and dad, by school, by other circumstances. But as you get out into the working world, after you graduate and have to kind of venture forth on your own, then a lot of it is no longer shielded. And it was always there, but you never had to necessarily deal with all the ramifications and the impact, right? And now that you're more independent, have to do things more on your own, it comes out and kind of sits on the main stage more than normal. What are some of the tips and tricks that you would advise for folks in order to kind of deal with certain things? So maybe we'll take them from a reverse order. So those professional challenges, what are some of the things that would help in terms of dealing with rejection from a job or dealing with challenging work environments or work activities? What are some of the things that you might suggest for folks in order to deal with those sorts of adversities?
Yeah, thanks for that and setting the tone for the rest of the minisode in terms of order. Before I start talking about any of that, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, while everybody does have adversities in their life, if at any point folks do feel like life is way too overwhelming and there are too many adversities, please reach out to somebody for help.
For sure.
Talk to a friend that you trust or a family member. You don't have to go through adversity alone. And there are so many resources to help folks to speak to professionals if they are really, really feeling down on their luck. That being said, like I said, adversity comes in many forms: professional, COVID, interpersonal. And so was your question about what are some professional challenges that I faced, or did you want to hear a different angle?
Or more dealing with that adversity. So this is all about dealing with adversity. So one view is to just suck it up, right, and deal with it, right? And that's not necessarily the best way. So are there more kind of strategies or tactics that will help people kind of overcome the various strategies the various challenges as they get into them?
Yeah, I'd say that dealing with adversity is about knowing your strengths. Everybody has a different outlet for how they feel most relaxed, most happy, but you really need to know how you work in that sense, what really like ignites the fire inside of you
Mhm.
in order to deal with adversity. For example, if you love to talk to your friends and you've noticed that you've kind of like become more into your shell because you're going through a hard time in your life, make it an effort to reach out to folks. Or, you know, if you're going through some adversity in your life that's, you haven't gotten any fresh air in days, but you really value that daily walk. You need to think about that and think, okay, well, how can I go get that fresh air? Can I like open the window? Can I go onto the balcony? Even small steps are good. So it's about coping with the things that make you feel best. And only you can be the person to decide that. You need to know what suits you. Um, and also reflecting on it. I think journaling is amazing. I think I've mentioned journaling in a past
Mhm.
podcast episode. Writing out how you feel, why you feel that way, and what your plans are to try to move on from that. It's okay to sit in a feeling and say, I'm really upset right now, or I'm really sad, and write about it or meditate, anything like that. But then the important part of moving on is saying, okay, what am I going to do next? What's my next step?
For sure. From my perspective, dealing with adversity oftentimes is just a mind game, right? And really, if you can kind of shore up your mindset. So a couple of things that come to mind is the quote, "This too shall pass." Right. So oftentimes, especially for something like COVID, knowing that well, the human race is resilient, right? There's basically some sort of issue or pandemic or catastrophe that happens every kind of 6 to 12 years, right? So for those that were around 2008, 9, then the financial meltdown happened in 2002, 1, that was like 9/11 and the dot-com bubble, and then in the 90s or something, in the 80s or something, and every decade there was pretty much something. So that's just to say that beware of COVID 2029 or something that's going to happen in a couple of years, hopefully a little longer, but there will always be something, and it's cyclical. But keep in mind that this too shall pass, right? So we'll get over it, we'll recover, and it's kind of that expression: "What doesn't kill you will make you stronger," and we'll all be stronger as a result. But the main part, from a mindset perspective, I find it's actually a quote again. You know that I love quotes, but this one is from Hamlet, from Shakespeare, and they basically say, "For there is nothing good or bad, and thinking makes it so." Right. So if you think about what is happening, it is, right. You got laid off from work. You got rejected in an offer, right? Well, that's not good or bad, right? So if you got rejected from an offer and you find out that your future boss was like a crazy person and was someone who would like be out to get you and had crazy work ethic, that sort of thing, and really wanted to micromanage you, then maybe you dodged a bullet in that. So it was something that you could actually be thankful for, because the role might have been amazing, but there was something remiss about the situation, right? So anything could be construed as good or bad, depending on how you decide to take it, right? So one of the questions for you, or not you, but whoever is kind of evaluating themselves, is how is life or how is this incident helping you? How is it working for you? Is it happening for you versus happening to you, right? And if you take that perspective of it's happening for me for a particular reason, to help me grow stronger, to help me be more resilient, so I can tackle even larger challenges and really achieve my full potential later on, well, that's probably a good reason for doing that. So those are a couple of things that I think are helpful in order to help deal with adversity. Are there any other kind of insights that you would share with other folks in dealing with adversity?
Yeah, I love how you mentioned that very last thing where you said, is the situation doing something to me or doing something for me?
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult to get to that mindset sometimes, to try to see the good in a situation. And sometimes there is no good in a situation. Sometimes things are just really, really crappy. But at least if you can, reflect on it and journal about it, like I've said, you can at least see that you can at least glean some insights from it.
Mhm.
And I'll give you an example. So when I found out a couple weeks ago that I didn't get this job that I had applied for and that I was looking forward to getting, I was pretty torn up about it. It made me, fairly sad. And I thought at first that I was just sad because I didn't get the job. But the more that I thought about it and kind of like sat with those feelings, I realized it wasn't just that I was sad I didn't get the job, but it was because I was feeling a little bit burnt out from my current job.
Mm.
And if I had just tried to like get over it and move on and be happy, I don't think I would have gotten to that stage of reflection.
Mhm.
So the point that I'm making here is that if something happens to you and it's adverse, you don't necessarily get the most benefit out of just, kind of binging Netflix and not thinking about it. But if you can afford time to talk out those feelings with a friend or with a therapist, a counselor, really reflecting on what's happening, why you feel that way, I think it's incredibly valuable. So
Yeah,
not moving on too fast, essentially, just reflecting on those feelings.
for sure. And what I've come to understand is that emotions are basically information, right? So just like your thoughts or your mind giving you suggestions, emotions are almost like your body, right? Kind of that your gut feel or whatever, giving you a sense of what's important to you, right? Because you wouldn't care, you wouldn't be so sad or whatever if it didn't matter, right? So that it gives you a sense of what is important to you, and now it's a matter of what do you want to do with it. So I often use a model where when something happens, you usually do one of four things. You either react to it, right? So this is like the punch and screaming of the wall and yelling at the top of your lungs, like this is not fair, I should have got it, whatever. Some people do that, but oftentimes people bottle up and they resist it, right? That's kind of like taking one of those kind of flotation devices on the swimming pool and then push it down, but eventually it pops back up, and usually with more force than the original resisting. The other part is ignore, right? Which is kind of what you said, binging on Netflix. I don't even want to deal with it. I'll just escape into my other reality. But then again, it usually goes back to one of the other two because you haven't dealt with it. And the last one, if you can really do it, is to accept, right? To do what you said, journal and say, okay, why did I feel this way? Or what else is happening around? And oh, actually, it's not related to this. It's related to something else. And if you can go through that series of inquiry, self-inquiry for yourself, then I think it will be very helpful to be able to be a little bit more resilient and deal with that adversity. And one thing that I encourage folks to do is, well, not necessarily seek out adversity, but to just be aware that oftentimes when you hit that adversity, that means you're growing. You're doing things that you wouldn't have otherwise done, and you're really getting to that point where you are reaching that potential that you want to be having. Because if all you're doing is day in and day out, you're being successful and doing exactly what you've done, and everything's working out according to plan, well, that probably means because you're well below your limit and haven't actually do it. So with success, it comes failure, right? And adversity oftentimes is that failure wrapped around in a different way. So if you can kind of think of that adversity, well, this means I'm growing and advancing and getting even better. Well, that's another amazing perspective to have as well.
Absolutely. To use a word to paraphrase what you've been saying is that this comes along with risk taking.
Mm-hmm.
And young professionals, folks who are, in university or college right now, entering the workforce or moving through some other stage of their odyssey, are bound to have to take risks.
Mm-hmm.
And those risks come with adversity. But I think the point that we're both coming back to is that adversity in itself is not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all going to have to deal with it. But what matters the most is how you're able to process that adversity.
Yeah, and it's being able to recover from it, and hopefully in a shorter amount of time each episode that it happens, so that it's not like years, months, weeks in the making. Well, some people, it might only be a few moments where the emotion will happen, right? But it's a matter of, oh, you know what? I don't actually have to think that, because this is what I learned from it. This is what I can take from it. This is what I can take from it in order to grow and become the best version of myself. So I think that's a lot of interesting and useful tips and tricks from a perspective of dealing with adversity.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at LukiDanu, LukiDanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.